No, well, look, so a lot of people think that it's related to game cribbage as well. That's not the case. It's just a Cornish term. I don't really have to explain to you what this is. Right? Use your mind as taught. Nicknames for everything underground, so the nickname for this thing's the Thunderbox. Okay, I'm not showing you this because I think you need to know how a miner goes to the tour. Pretty sure we've got that covered. I'm showing you this because some miners felt it was a good way to steal gold. Alright, so what they do, get a piece of cloth, put a piece of gold in the cloth, wrap it up, chuck it in the Thunderbox can. When the can was full, youngest bloke in the mine, 16-year-old mining apprentice, or the oldest bloke in the mine, the bloke who's not quite as fit and strong as he used to be, would have been his job to empty that can there, take it up to the surface and just dump the contents on the mullock heap. The big pile of waste rock, that's all they did with the contents of that can. That's when our miner comes along afterwards, and I guess you could say he tries to find his nugget. That's the best way I've got to describe it. It's a gross way of stealing gold, but they felt like it was successful. There was a miner that worked at this mine in 1953. He got caught stealing gold this way, ended up doing 2 months in prison. He was a labourer. He was on that basic weekly wage, which is why he was tempted to steal the gold. I'm not going to tell you that he was the brightest bloke going around. No, he came back to the mine at night whilst he was drunk to try and retrieve his gold. He was pretty easy to catch. Right, so he got 2 months for trying to steal the gold via the old Thunderbox here. And no, it would not have been hidden away so that you had a bit of privacy. All right, you just would have to hope that you weren't going to get too much traffic when you were getting the business going, I suppose. We've moved off a crosscut, moved onto a drive. We're getting towards the centre of that anticlinal fold. Well, hopefully we're going to find a quartz reef with gold in it. Miners like to call this area centre country. And I've stopped you here to point out the wooden structure that a couple of you are standing underneath. Very important piece of safety for our miners back in the old days. It's what they used to build whenever they felt the rock was a bit unsafe or unstable and they needed to protect themselves. All right, so here in Bendigo we call them timber sets. They do go by different names across the goldfields. Like over towards Ballarat, they like to call them talking timbers, but here in Bendigo we just call them timber sets. All right, so made of legs either side. Big guy across the top there, that's the cap. All the boards that run along the roof or run along the walls. Call that lagging. The lagging is the important stuff. That's what catches those rocks, or what miners called scats, whenever they fell from the roof or fell from the walls. Right, now usually you wouldn't use nails when you built these things. Right, it's wet and horrible down here all the time. Your nails would rust out pretty quickly. Your main job as a miner is to get rock out, not to replace rusted out nails. So what they used instead, these big joins that you can see there on the corners, they're called joggle joints. All right, because of all the moisture down here, made the timber swell, made the joins nice and tight. Coupled with wedges in between the roof of the mine and the lagging that force everything down nice and firmly, got yourself a nice firm structure that requires very little maintenance. Now this is just local timber as well. Don't use special wood to build these things. Don't use red gum like we do in the mine shaft. Just use whatever trees were closest to the mine. So here in Bendigo, that's either iron bark or grey box. If you have a quick squiz up at the roof, you can see we don't have a lot of support in this area. Okay, like I just said, you don't need support everywhere. The rock under Bendigo is super hard, all right, but it did mean at the start of every shift, miners had to check the rock, make sure that that rock was still safe for miners to be working there. Right? That technique they used to check that rock's called sounding, or sounding the backs. You always nicknamed the roof of the mine the back, because over there in Cornwall, when they were digging rock off the floor, their back was always pointed to the roof of the mine, so you always nicknamed the roof of the mine the back. So what they do, grab a pinch bar, hit it into the rock, listen to the noise that it makes. That's it. That's all they did. Right, nice solid sound, a ringing noise like a bell, ding-a-ling-ling, thumbs up, rock safe, keep mining, no problems. Makes a bit of an echoey, hollow sort of a noise, a little bit like a funny drum, thumbs down, no good, got to do a bit more work. Right, so what they might do is grab a pinch bar and try and smash it out of the wall, right, that weak rock. That's called barring down or scaling. It's something we still do down here. If that doesn't work, that's where they build timber sets, or in more modern mining, it's where they put in rock bolts. Right, as has already been pointed out, wherever you see a square plate on the wall with a circle in the middle of it, those are rock bolts. They're a modern way of making the rock nice and safe. You're going to notice them the whole way around when we work today. I'll explain how they work briefly in a minute. First things first though, I'm going to hit the rock and show you the different noises miners are looking for. There's that ringing noise like a bell, ding-a-ling. Happy with that one. And there's that echoey, hollow sort of a noise. Don't worry, gents, that's why there's a rock bolt there. Can't do that without a rock bolt, mate. Too much paperwork involved. No one wants that. That's all about no paperwork for me. Now, timber sets took a long time to build, so when rock bolts came along, it made life a lot easier for miners. So the type of rock bolt we use down here these days are these things. They're called split sets. They were developed in the US in the 70s, and they're made of springing steel. Now, springing steel naturally likes to stay open, which is why there's a nice big long gap down the front of them there. So what a miner will do, right, is he'll grab his drill and he'll drill a hole in the rock that's a little bit narrower than the split set and a touch longer, and using that same drill, he'll drive it into that hole. Right, now that smaller hole will close the gap up at the front. Springing steel wants to stay open though, so once you finish drilling into the hole, it pins itself against the walls of the hole it's been drilled through, pinning those layers all together. Right, it's not labelled in that back window though, right? So you crew down the back there, you'll be experts at finding all that gold by the time I finish going on about it. Right, it's like advanced level where's Wally down the back. Alright, so what we've got here is a small quartz reef. You can tell we're in the middle of that anticlinal fold because we've got a nice dome shape to it up the front. You notice that as you wander on past it. Right, as I said though, this is a small reef. The further underground you go, the bigger quartz reefs become, but this one's still got plenty of the good stuff in it, still got plenty of gold. Now, not every quartz reef was mined. It had to be profitable to mine. Right, so that means for every ton of quartz that we pulled out from underground back in the old days, we had to find at least 10 grams worth of gold in it for that to be considered profitable. 1 ton of quartz, that's 2 mine trucks filled with the white rock. 10 grams worth of gold's about the size of the top of my little finger, that's it. That's all they needed to find. Right, that was what was considered profitable. So 15 years worth of mining here in central Deborah, we removed 64,000 tonnes worth of quartz. We removed 40,000 tonnes worth of mullock, the waste rock, that grey sandstone and slate, for a grand total of 929 kilos worth of gold, a little bit under a tonne. Right, we weren't considered a very profitable mine, even though that amount of gold today is worth over $75 million. I think we average about 14 grams to the tonne, so we're only just above that minimum amount. Now, right, now there is one more thing to keep an eye out for on the walls there. It's called iron pyrite. Does anyone know the other name for iron pyrite? Fool's gold. Well done all at once. That's well played. Fool's gold. Now there is a very small amount of gold in fool's gold, but you've got to use a lot of nasty chemicals to get it out. And that's not something we did. All we did was collect it up, sell it off to somebody else who could be bothered trying. That's the best way I've got to describe it. Alright, now your fool's gold's got a pretty, sparkly, shiny. Don't fall for it. It's the dull yellow looking stuff you're after, not the pretty sparkly shiny stuff. Lots of fool's gold all over the back wall. There's another type of rock attached to it, usually quartz. Alright, so what you're looking at here is specimen gold. Okay? Get up there, have a look at your gold, look at your fool's gold. Once you've done that, wander on down this way. My favourite bit of gold here. Taking a picture of this is like trying to take a picture of a landscape. You look at the picture afterwards and you go, that's not what I was looking at. That's not what I was looking at. You know, when all that silica was coming up from underground, it was bringing a heap of different minerals with it, so you got a far higher chance of finding a good amount of gold in there. Plain white quartz reefs got left behind. Right, this particular reef is what we call a laminated quartz reef. It almost looks like it's all laid up in there, a little bit like a rock lasagna. Not lasagna. The rock underneath Bendigo is 5 to 7 times harder than concrete. Alright, you can't just take to the walls with a pick and break it open. It doesn't work like that down here. The only way we can make these areas where we're standing in now is by drilling holes into the rock, filling them with explosives and blowing the rock to bits. It's the only way you can do it. It's called drilling and blasting. Alright, early days, this is the technique they used to drill those holes. Alright, it's a hammer and tap technique. It's a Cornish technique. Right, quarter turn at a time. Dip away a hole in the rock, big enough to fit your explosive in. Okay, sort of looks like this in action. Now I've been doing these tours for a while. That hole has not got any deeper. Alright, so one man could do that job, but it was far easier to do it in a team. So what they used to do was have one bloke holding the drill steel against the wall, right? One or two of his mates with hammers like that, swinging as hard as they could. Bloke holding the drill steel did the quarter turns. He's also hoping his mates don't miss and break his fingers. A lot of trust involved, right? Drilling a hole like that, you can drill a 1 metre hole in 4 hours. You need at least 12 holes for an effective blast pattern. It's a slow way of going about it. And that's what we did here at Central Deborah for the first few months we operated. So we had enough space to get compressed air lines down so we could run pneumatic drills. Alright, so big green guy over here in the corner, this is what we call a stroker or a reciprocator. Alright, came along in the 1880s. This particular one was built in Bendigo around that same time, so weighs 150 kilos. Alright, it's over 140 years old and can drill a 1 metre hole in 40 minutes. That's heaps quicker. Acts like a mechanical version of that hammer and tap. Massive problem with it though. Kicks up a heap of dust. Right, that dust would fill the air and miners are breathing in. What they're breathing in contains silica, it's a natural form of glass, settle on their lungs and they develop something called silicosis or miner's complaint. The life expectancy of a miner using a drill like that was about 40 years of age, which is why they nicknamed them widowmakers. Right, silicosis was the biggest killer across the goldfield by a long, long way, particularly in Bendigo. Right, got to give them credit though, it only took them about 20 years to figure out that all you had to do to get rid of your dust problem was have a bloke standing here with the hose of water pointing at the hole. Only took them about 20 years to figure that out though. This drill here though is my favourite. This is the drifter drill. This is the drill we used here at Central Deborah for the entire 15 years the mine operated. Now drifter drills came along in the early 1900s, but what you need to know about them is that the drill still there is hollow. Alright, so that means that as a miner was drilling, you could pump water through the drill steel and turn that dust into a mud called slurry. So I've eliminated the dust problem. Alright, all that water running through there also means your drill tip stays cool, so it stays sharper for longer. It's more efficient, it's more effective. Alright, a drifter drill could drill a 1.5 metre hole in 15 minutes. And I'm going to turn it on for you. But it is going to be loud, so what I need you to do is put your fingers in your ears, as best you can for me, please. Fingers in your ears, fingers in your ears. Ready, set. It's a more modern drill, came along in the 1950s, only weighs 50 kilos this thing, so it can be moved around and operated by one man at a time. Still runs on compressed air, still got your hollow drill steel, and an air leg drill can drill a 2 metre hole in 5 to 10 minutes. It's far more effective and efficient, but unfortunately it was also far too expensive at the time it came along. There's a handful of reasons this mine was forced to close. One of those reasons, using old and outdated equipment like drifter drills. We had been able to purchase air leg drills in the 50s, happy days. Operate for longer, just couldn't afford them at the time. Still used in modern mining today. Right, that project with those pumps are down on level 4 that we're doing at the moment, they've used air leg drills for that project. Right, so they are still used. Smaller projects, but they are still used. Just couldn't afford them when we were operational, unfortunately. Let me show you all the way around to the corner here. Move your way down. We're going to have a look at this corner here, so I want to make sure these screwed out the back you can see. Germans had a big impact early in the mining history here in Bendigo. The Cornish came along about the 1870s, and they were expert underground miners. Righto. Drilled out holes in the rock. You don't just drill holes wherever you feel like. You've got to drill them into patterns. Patterns are the most effective way to blast the rock apart. So the pattern we use here at Central Deborah is this one you can see here in the corner. It's called the Bendigo drag cutter, which developed for use here in Bendigo wherever drifter drills were used, like the one I just demonstrated for you, based off a Cornish pattern, of course it was. Alright, now you start up the holes at the top there, called back holes, and every half metre down, drill another series of holes until you reach these yellow ones here that are angled down towards the floor. They're called cut holes. They're supposed to be a miner's waist height, the Cornish for little fellas. And the last ones you drill out are the ones down there in the floor, the lifters. Clean them out, pack them full of explosive. Our explosive of choice for this stuff up the top here is gelignite. We like gelignite because it was a far safer explosive to use, because gelignite would not blast a rock apart unless there was a detonator attached to it, unlike a lot of those earlier explosives which had a knacker just blowing up for no real good reason. So we like gelignite, it's good stuff. Okay, you can see here we've got blast cord as well. Blast cord is cut to different lengths, right, because you needed these explosions over here to go off one at a time. Had to go off individually, had to go off in a very specific order. Okay, so the first holes we need to blast were the cut holes here. Bang! That creates a weakness in the rock, gives us an area for the explosives above it to blast into. Bang, 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 one at a time they blast up to the back holes. Last one's to go with the lifters in the floor. Alright, the lifters would drop all that rock and material out of the cross-cut or drive, so it's easier for the next crew to clean up. Alright, all 16 to 20 tonnes of it. Okay, so to set it off, the miner grabs his Bendigo bucket lamp, he lights up his fuses, then he'd head all the way back round to the plat where we started our tour underground today, and that's where he'd stop, wait, count. Count all 20 of those explosions to make sure they went off. You counted 20, beautiful, job's done. Back to the surface you go, day's over. You go to count 19 or 18, that's when there's been a misfire. Something's gone wrong, hasn't gone to plan. So what the miner would do then, go back to the surface anyway. Tell the next crew it's the next crew's problem. Right? It's not because he's been lazy, it's because if you come back too soon after a misfire and it blows up the lane, that's when people got hurt. Plenty of time between each shift for everything to settle down, and the next crew knew how to handle that problem. Alright, safety first. We only have this in the rock either anymore. What you do is use a bigger drill bit and drill the weakness into the face. You can see that there in the middle. Alright, around that weakness there, that's where you drill your smaller holes. Out, 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 diamond, square shaped patterns till you reach the width and the height of the drive. It's those smaller holes you'll fill with explosives. Obviously don't use gelignite anymore, there's more modern explosives available to us these days, but what they use is electric detonators to set them all off. Okay, you don't just move 50 metres around the corner anymore like they did back in the old days, by the way. Safety standards have changed just a touch, just about the whole mine needs to be evacuated. Okay, but what I can do, keep your eyes on the burn card here. I've got it all wired up, ready to go. I'm going to show you what we're talking about in terms of a pattern or a sequence. Alright, so keep your eyes on the burn cut there. Ready? Fire in the hole. Starts nice and small around the weakness, moves further out, it's expanding the weakness. It's the basic principle all blast patterns work on, they're expanding that weakness the miners have created. They'll blast back as far back as the holes are drilled too. Alright, so that one there's 1.5 metres, one behind me here is about 2 metres. It wasn't the sound they were listening for per se, it was more they were feeling for the vibrations. Right, you can feel the vibrations from these explosions all the way up to the surface. Okay, even the publican over the road at the National Hotel, he could feel them, so he knew he had about 30 minutes to have 30 beers lined up on the bar, but not got a kind of an early warning system. We've got one last stop to make, okay? If you are tall, please well display. It's because all your crosscuts and drives slope downhill. Alright, so all that natural groundwater can drain away, so all that water from your drills can drain away. Alright, so obviously we're getting to the low point here where all that water wants to drain itself back down to the shaft and get to that lower point again. Alright, water's lazy, water's lazy. Alright, Australian mining, when you get rid of rock from underground, it's called bogging. Alright, here at Central Deborah, we use a very specific piece of equipment to get the job done. This shovel. 15 years worth of mining, that's all they use down here to get rid of that rock and material from underground. Okay, nickname for these things is the banjo, based on the shape and the sound it makes as it goes across the rock step. Right, now miners always worked in pairs using banjos. They could fill a mine truck like that one over there with 500 kilos worth of rock in 10 minutes. Right, then they had to push that all the way back around to the plat. The plat could be 500 metres away. Once you got there, you grabbed an empty mine truck, push it back again, and did that till you got rid of 16 to 20 tonnes worth of material. That's before you've drilled your holes in the rock, before you blasted the rock apart, of course, and on top of any other job you had to do down here like building timber sets or sounding. That's how Bendigo got its gold out from underground. That was your 8-hour mine shift. Clear rock, drill holes, blow rock to bits so the next crew can do the exact same thing. So you can push your cross-cutting drive back 1.5 metres a shift. Okay? This yellow thing here made life a touch easier for miners when it come along. It's called a rocker shovel or a rail bogger. Came along in the late 1930s. It runs on compressed air like you can see there. Or you have machinery underground ran on compressed air. You couldn't use fuels. Alright, only need one man to run this thing. Okay, we would have had a platform hanging off the side there that the operator stood on. Got your controls on the side here. Got your bucket at the front. Drive it forward, pick up your rock, swing the bucket over, fill your mine truck up in 2 minutes. It's heaps quicker. Right, massive problem with it though. It loves a nice big open area like where we are now, and that's not the sort of space we had in this mine. Right, when we were operational, our crosscuts and drives were maybe this wide and maybe this high. Right, that thing takes up most of the space. Not only that, it weighs 2 tonnes, and the only way you can get it in and out from underground is in the mine cage. The mine cage is too small. You have to break it down, take it down piece by piece, and then reassemble it underground. That's no good either. More importantly, banjos are a lot cheaper at the hardware store. Okay, it always comes down to money in the end. All right, these are a lot. We expanded our crosscuts and drives for tools. Just couldn't have had it when we were an operational mine, unfortunately. Any last minute questions before we move back around to the lift and go back up to the top?